The Dupree mansion, once a symbol of wealth and power, has now become the scene of an unthinkable scandal. Anita returned home early and caught Vernon, her seemingly perfect husband, embracing Sharon right in the living room. In an instant, the glittering image of the prestigious family shattered. But what's more terrifying is the truth behind that moment. Was this merely an affair, or the beginning of a much larger conspiracy hidden beneath fabricated emotions? As Vernon remained silent, Sharon appeared calm, and Anita stood frozen in disbelief. One question began to haunt everyone: what is love, what is betrayal, and who is truly pulling the strings in this cruel game? That afternoon, the Dupree mansion was no longer the haven Anita once believed in. It had become a stage of guilt where every emotion was warped and a love once sacred was now nothing more than an intricate lie. When Anita stepped into the house, she never imagined that very moment would destroy everything she had guarded through years of marriage to Vernon. Sunset poured through the glass, skimming the polished floor where she saw the image that froze her heart. Vernon, the man who had sworn never to betray, was holding Sharon in the living room. It wasn't a clumsy, mistaken embrace. It was quiet, deliberate, weighted with feeling. Sharon rested her head on his shoulder, and Vernon lowered his gaze, distant, as if seeking comfort or absolution from another woman. In that instant, time stopped. The air thickened, each breath cut like a blade. The white bouquet slipped from Anita's hand and shattered across the cold tile, petals like splinters of trust. Memories surged: nights Vernon came home late, meetings that stretched without warning, the faraway look he wore even when lying beside her in the same bed. Harmless fragments now locked into a single picture, complete, merciless, devastating. What stunned her most wasn't the act of betrayal but Vernon's eyes. There was no panic, no fear, no scramble for excuses. His gaze was cold, hollow, as if he had accepted she would witness this, as if the scene itself had been calculated. Anita felt her heart clamp shut, and beneath the pain, a chill anger stirred. What she had witnessed might not be a simple affair. Vernon was not a man easily steered by emotion. He was the type who hid everything behind poise, who could turn mistakes into strategic moves. Had he truly fallen for Sharon? Or was this theater designed to conceal something larger, deeper, darker? The answer might be more brutal than infidelity. If Vernon was manipulating Sharon, or the reverse, what was their target? A financial secret? Money hidden through the family's charitable foundations? Or a scheme to shield the Dupree name from an impending scandal? As night swallowed the house, Anita no longer cried. Tears had run dry, leaving only the hollow of an abyss. She began retracing the signs she had ignored. Irregular bank invoices, calls from strangers claiming to be business partners, sudden trips under the banner of community support. If Sharon was truly entangled with him, this went far beyond romance. Sharon had once been Vernon's partner in an investment venture, a woman with administrative reach over a chain of anonymous accounts. If lines had been crossed, then perhaps Vernon was protecting something more vital than love, power and reputation. But Anita was not a woman who would sit still and be deceived. Born into a political family, she had been taught that every feeling could become a weapon. Her anger hardened into a cold, quiet force. In the night, she powered on her computer and entered her husband's private files. Numbers appeared, concealed transfers, funds shifting between charitable trusts and Sharon's private accounts. Every line of data was a knife in her faith, but also a ledger of leverage to seize control. She realized her marriage had been refashioned into a shield for tangled schemes, with her as the figurehead while Vernon pulled the strings. While Anita sat in the dark, the screen's blue light sharpening the edges of her resolve, Vernon stared at a family photo in his office. He couldn't sleep, not from guilt, but from fear. He knew Anita was intelligent. Once she doubted, the truth would not stay buried. Sharon, the woman he believed he could manage, was becoming a threat. She knew too much, and ambition had begun to bloom. Whatever had started between them, calculation or feeling, had become a double-edged blade. Vernon sensed he was being swallowed by his own game. The next morning, Anita said nothing. She moved with cool composure, preparing breakfast as though nothing had happened. Vernon descended the stairs, their eyes met without warmth. Inside each of them, a private plan was taking shape. Vernon knew he had to protect the secret at any cost, and Anita knew that silence was the most efficient weapon. In that house, love had died, only suspicion, strategy, and counterfeit smiles remained. When Sharon reappeared days later, wearing confidence like a perfume and a smile that refused to settle, Anita watched from the landing, full of conflict. She could expose everything, strip Vernon bare, destroy Sharon standing, but the deepest part of her still wanted to understand the true motive. Had Vernon truly loved Sharon, or were they weaving a net to hide something far more terrible? That night, Anita opened her husband's safe. Amid investment packets lay a thick envelope, copies of transactions tied to Sharon's shell company. Inside was an old photograph, Vernon and Sharon at a charity gala, their eyes not those of lovers but of accomplices. Anita's heart constricted. The betrayal was not confined to the heart, it bled into money, power, ambition. Anger surged, no longer aimed at Vernon or Sharon alone, but at her own softness for trusting too much. She knew she could not forgive, and she could not retreat. If Vernon was willing to play with fire, she would let the flames devour the empire he had built on lies. The storm within the Dupree mansion had only begun. 3 people, Anita, Vernon, and Sharon, were now lashed together in a single web of betrayal where love, prestige, and faith crashed violently. None of them could escape without scars. When a secret has been buried too long, the price of protection is no longer silence, but the soul of anyone desperate enough to survive inside it. Night fell over Fairmont Crest like a curse that could not be lifted. The lights inside the Dupree mansion still burned, yet they no longer suggested warmth, they only revealed the chill between 3 people trapped in a maze of their own making. Anita sat alone in the study, the documents she had copied from Vernon's safe spread before her. Every number, every signature, every piece of proof cut deep into the past she once thought perfect. She knew she had crossed a line with no return, no longer the betrayed wife, but the one holding the power to decide everyone's fate. Her anger no longer blazed, it turned cold and merciless, like a still lake concealing a deadly abyss beneath. Vernon returned late, his face taut, his eyes clouded with unease. He knew Anita had discovered something, but not how much. He tried to appear calm, yet every step she took, every breath she drew, unsettled him. 2 fears tangled in his mind. Fear of losing the polished image of the successful husband, and fear of losing the power he had built on dubious arrangements. He was no longer sure what he was defending, love, reputation, or the hollow shell of pride. Sharon, who once believed she could control everything, was beginning to understand that the game had slipped beyond her grasp. Promises, hidden funds, clandestine meetings, all of it was becoming a weight she could no longer bear. She did not know whether Vernon still stood on her side or had quietly recalculated. She sensed the change in him, the cold gaze, the abrupt calls, the evenings he vanished without explanation. Deep down, Sharon realized she was no longer merely a lover, she might have become a pawn in a plan even she did not comprehend. Inside that house, trust had evaporated. Every breath, every glance was laced with suspicion. Anita knew Vernon was hiding more than she had uncovered, but she chose silence, because silence now was the sharpest weapon. Vernon knew Anita was waiting for him to slip, yet he did not dare confront her. Sharon drifted like a shadow between them, both fearful and scheming, aware that one small mistake could bring everything crashing down. When the clock struck midnight, Anita rose and cracked open the window. Cold wind swept in, carrying the damp scent of an oncoming rain. She looked out over the garden, once the backdrop of their wedding photos, the place where Vernon had promised to love her for life. Now it was only the past. She understood that love does not die of betrayal, it dies of the silence that follows. And it was that silence that was slowly killing the 3 people inside this house. Vernon stepped in behind her, stopping at the threshold, his gaze caught between regret and fear. Anita did not turn. She needed no explanations anymore, the truth was already laid bare in his eyes. In that moment, she knew they had reached the point of no return. And even if the storm outside swept everything away, the truth would remain, persistent as a wound that never heals. As the door closed, only the first patter of rain on the tiles remained, merging with the thickening dark. One question still hung in the air: did Vernon truly love Sharon, or was he simply ensnared by a game of his own making? And Anita, now fully awake, would she choose revenge, forgiveness, or burn everything down to reclaim sovereignty over her life? A new chapter was opening in Fairmont Crest, where every beam of light cast the deepest shadows in the human soul.